It's just me, so I can live with that. That's
It's
good.
different. Call a meeting to order of the Woodfin Board of Commissioners, this being Tuesday, May the 18th, 2021. First item will be the invocation. Alderman Honeycutt, Commissioner Honeycutt, would you have that, please?
Covered both bases.
Yeah.
Heavenly Father, thank you once again for the blessings that you bestowed upon us. We pray that you'll continue to lead and guide the board. You'll also go with the leaders of the nation, that you'll help them make the right decisions. Again, continue to bless and be with our community. Amen.
In accordance with the code of ethics adopted by the board, all town commissioners have a duty to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions, to uphold the integrity and independence of the office, to avoid impropriety in the exercise of official duties, to faithfully perform the duties of the office, and to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which will have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact for any board member? Also, does any board member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before this board today? There being none, all board members have a duty and obligation to vote. Next item is approval of the agenda with one addition.
That addition would be item number 8. It would be an amendment to the personnel ordinance regarding deferred compensation.
Okay, to have a motion to approve the agenda with that one addition.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The next item will be approval of the April 20, 2021 regular meeting minutes and May 4, 2021 work session minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Moved out.
Second.
She's just been back for 2 years.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any
God.
opposed? Next item, the public is invited to view this meeting of the town board via Zoom using the link https://zoom.us/ what is that, J or I? J/955-111-26658. All documents relating to agenda items not published on the website may be viewed in advance of the meetings in person at Town Hall, 90 Up Mountain Road, Woodfin. Next item be public comments for the general public, and we do have several that have been submitted in writing, and you go ahead with those, please.
I'll read the public comments for 15 minutes. At that point, I will stop, and the commissioners have copies of all these that were received today and up back to the last meeting. First one is from Diane Jones. This was forwarded to me after the last meeting because I guess the original email didn't go through to, I guess I sent it to Jason, so the email didn't get sent. Says, dear commissioners, this is in reference to the proposed construction in Woodfin. Strategic Real Investment Partners, LLC, a Tampa, Florida-based developer, has submitted plans to construct 1,545 luxury residential condo units in Woodfin adjacent to Richmond Hill Park and on the banks of the French Broad River. My parents, Della and James Organ, were salamander researchers, including having the honor of having species named in our region, named for them in 2010. I can't pronounce that, and I don't want to butcher the name of the salamander. The destruction of stream coves and intact wooded areas that this project will cause is unacceptable to a town nestled in the salamander capital of the world. Unlike birds that might fly away during construction and fly back and regain use of some of the habitat after construction is completed, salamander populations cannot flee and return. The salamanders live underground and in our streams. The turning of the soil, the compacting of soil from traffic, and the weight of the equipment and destruction of the shade of the intact tree canopy all cause devastation to the key salamander species from crushing and drying, and increased temperature extremes beyond their range of tolerance. We can choose what and where we build and allow building to happen. We must choose to reuse the habitats that have already been destroyed by construction or farming, and choose to preserve wooded habitats, and particularly stream coves and the surrounding acres where they still exist. Please choose wisely. The next comment is from Rebecca Craig. Please take into consideration the need to build a bridge and commit to a stormwater management plan before the Florida developer starts to build the bluffs. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Next one is from Lenny Sitnick. Dear Woodfin Commissioners, it is my sincere hope that you consider the environment, the investments of the existing residents, and the hopes and dreams of your Woodfin neighbors. The shock to the system and infrastructure that this development will impact will either result in a sustainable future for the town of Woodfin and its residents, or it will lead to unbridled, undesirable, uncontrollable, unsightly, unmanageable growth for growth's sake. I hope your legacy is one we can all be proud of. Thank you for your time and attention to my comments. Sitnick, former mayor of Asheville, 98 to 02. Next comment is from M. Bernando. I am writing to ask the town appoint 2 new boards to improve the oversight of the future of Woodfin. The effect, responsible and sustainable growth, a zoning board of adjustment, and a planning board composed of community members who will balance the needs of existing properties and future developments needs to be established. These boards should consider the future of all residents of Woodfin and what legacy we leave for residents in the future. It is my belief that this is a critical moment in the town of Woodfin and that it is the responsibility of the town commissioners to care for the citizens and property of all. Additionally, I wholeheartedly oppose the bluffs at Richmond Hill and strongly suggest that this project should not go forward unless and until a new bridge with sewer lines and other infrastructure be designed, reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, the state DEQ, and built prior to approval of and any construction of said project. This project is not in the best interest of residents of Woodfin nor the environment, and the impact to the French Broad River is questionable to say the least. Please note my tagline beneath my signature and bear in mind your public is still watching. Next comment from Linda Larson. Friends of Woodfin, please don't let Woodfin become another short-sighted municipality that leaves its residents destitute because of big money from outside developers. We have lived here since 1984 and we understand the value of growth and expansion. It just has to be accomplished with the overall benefit to the Woodfin community in mind. It's not only the tax base to consider, but the horrific impact on the quality of life for your constituents. We're very displeased with the Bluffs project. Its size is disproportionate to the land and neighborhoods it desecrates along the way to becoming luxury housing for a few than affordable housing for the many. Please think squarely about this heinous project and consider the long-term effects. Next comment is from Kirk Boyle. To whom it may concern, I write in regard to the appointment of 2 new board members, one for the zoning board of adjustment and one for the planning. I have lived just outside Woodfin on Baird Cove Lane, which features a sign marking the town's limits for nearly 5 years. I moved onto a previously cleared lot at the base of Baird Mountain and have witnessed acres of the mountain overdeveloped at a rapid pace over the past few years. I write to ask that the appointed community members are folks who desire responsible and sustainable growth for the town of Woodfin in a short, mid, and long-term future. New board members should value balancing the needs of the existing properties with those for new development. They must consider the future for all, natural residents included, and what legacy/problems they're leaving behind. Besides my side of town, I'm also concerned about the Bluffs project, which is adjacent to the wondrous Richmond Park, a place I've grown to love in the past handful of years for its disc golf course and walking trails. When I moved to Asheville over a decade ago, I was struck by how literally green the place was. In developing into a small southern city, the Asheville region, Woodfin obviously included, needs to find a reasonable balance between economic growth and the quality of life for its current residents, natural ones included. All should not be sacrificed on the altar of the almighty dollar. In particular, the last thing this area needs is yet another hotel and business park. What woodlands remain intact, which should continue to be so. I hope beyond all hope that the 2 new board members feel likewise. Thank you for your time and consideration. From Valerie. To the town of Woodfin, appointing new board for the planning and zoning and adjustments this month carries the weight of the health of Woodfin's residents and future generations. We are facing numerous climate issues that are vital to take into consideration in any planning of Woodfin. Present residents are taxed heavily, and we want our opinions to matter to the board who serves us. I bought 6 acres in Woodfin 30 years ago and have managed the land in an environmentally friendly way. There are no toxic products allowed by any residents here. The town of Woodfin must set an example for all Woodfin residents in any future development. The use of chemical sprays on town property has been very disturbing as the runoff comes directly onto my property. Last year, a woman in protective clothing sprayed chemicals through our fence line on a 2-year-old and his father. We requested the halt of chemical use and received no response. If the, I assume TOW is town of Woodfin, is damaging people, wildlife, and pollinators, how can we expect town of Woodfin's board to be environmentally responsible when approving any new development? We below plead with the town of Woodfin to not only approve new board members who have a track record of showing environmental responsibility that will work towards a sustainable future for all Woodfin residents and future development. The bluffs at Riverbend planning and proposals have been overseen by these new board members, and there's been an enormous outcry over concerns on just that one project. Respectfully, residents from 5, 5.5, 7 to 7.5 Green Oak Road in Woodfin. The next comment is from Hazel Thornton. Tonight's zoning board appointments represent an opportunity to begin remediation for past land zoning designations that were poorly decided. The new zoning board members should be willing to re-examine steep slope and stormwater regulations at the local level. And at the state level, city and county officials with voter support must demand more local control and common sense from state legislators. Why would I-4 be designated opportunity zone instead of a blighted stretch of Woodfin along Weaverville Highway? Why would a sewer line be a necessary component of a bridge spanning the French Broad River? Both of these current situations are unfair, and residents and developers alike, but because they're legal under the eyes of North Carolina law. The next comment is from Marlo Weingart. Dear Woodfin Town of Commissioners and Mayor, please oppose the rezoning of this property as multi-use / high density. It can't / won't happen. Please consider the following. Sorry, if that can't or won't happen, please consider the following. Please be sure that approval and permits for the construction of a new bridge over the French Broad River must be in hand before the developer breaks ground to reduce neighborhood traffic safety concerns and potential environmental impacts. Please ensure that the developer agrees to additional stormwater measures that will protect water quality in the French Broad River. Please require that the developer agrees to a forested buffer between the new development and the Richmond Hill neighborhood. Please ensure that Woodfin's development ordinances are updated to ensure that future projects reflect the type of growth that residents want, not just what is easiest or most profitable for developers. The next comment is from Ben Saylor. I'm writing to relate that the commissioners appoint new members who want responsible and sustainable development for Woodfin so that our town keeps its scenic character, small town community values, and protects our most valuable resource, which is the French Broad River. We are dealing with a developer who wanted to build a water park on the banks of the French Broad River before COVID demoted that project to a luxury condo complex. We need a board in place that will view such projects from an objective perspective of what is best for the community and its homeowners, not developers attempting the next extravagant project like the Bluffs or what would have been, quote unquote, one of the largest water parks in the Southeast, according to Mr. Holdsworth. Thank you for your consideration and for the hard work you do for the town of Woodfin. We are paying close attention to this matter. The next comment is from Robert McGee. Dear town of Woodfin commissioners and mayor, please oppose. Please oppose the rezoning of the proposed Bluffs property as multi-use / high density. If that can or won't happen, please consider the following. Please be sure that the approval and permits for the construction of a new bridge over the French Broad River must be in hand before the developer breaks ground to reduce neighborhood traffic safety concerns and potential environmental impacts. And it looks like this is actually forwarded email from Marlo Weingart from Robert McGee, which we've already read, so I will not read the rest of the email as it is a repeat. The next email is from, or comment from Nathan Mueller. Hello, Town Commissioners. I'm writing to request that some considerations when making appointments to the Planning and Zoning Board as well as the Board of Adjustment. I'm a resident of Woodfin and have been since 2002 when my wife and I moved here. I've been excited about the proposed additions to Woodfin in the past. The Reynolds Mountain project had many exciting possibilities when first presented. And even though all the parts were not able to be completed for whatever reason, I still believe what has been done has been positive. The renovation of Roy Pope Park has created a gem for families to come to and enjoy. And the proposed new parks the new parks and upcoming Greenway / Blue Wave project holds many exciting possibilities. When considering people for positions on the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Adjustments, I ask that you look for the people who have a balanced, holistic look at development and land use. Balance between good, smart development by landowners and developers who care for our community and the people who live here and have lived here for many years. I feel recent proposals by developers have only been considered the money they could make and did not consider the current residents and established neighborhoods that would be affected by the impact of the development out of scale with the surrounding neighbors. Please consider the bigger picture and choose people who will keep in mind the health, environment, social relation, and economy as part of the development process. The board should work closely with the newly hired planning director, whose focus is listed as land use planning and regulation. Woodfin has made tremendous investments in projects that feature natural assets in our town. Please do not let those projects be marred by development that does not fit the town's plan for development or could jeopardize the success of those plans. Please look for board members who will take a holistic approach, consider surrounding developments, and ask, does this project fit Woodfin's long-range plans? Is it a responsible, sustainable development that will benefit the community? I know these jobs are not easy, and I'm very appreciative of what the town commissioners and town boards have done for the town of Woodfin. Please continue to keep an open ear to the community as these decisions have a long-lasting impact. The next comment is from Ralph Hagewood. The two Woodfin Board of Commissioners, we request that the new board for planning and development be selected with certain criteria. Firstly, the issue of fairness towards development as well as existing property should actually concern the members. Secondly, the members are open to the testimony of residents as regards to safety and health issues before they begin approval of a project. Thank you for your time. Due to time constraints, this is the last comment, so we've reached 15 minutes. This is from Linda Crivaro. Dear Commissioners, thank you for taking the time to hear my concerns and comments about the proposed development, the Bluffs at Riverbend. It is my understanding that there will be appointments to two new boards, one for planning and zoning and one for adjustment. And considering these appointments, I'm requesting that you appoint members who will want sustainable and responsible growth for Woodfin for the future. These members must consider the health and public safety of current and future residents of Woodfin and the surrounding communities. Woodfin is in Buncombe County, and the proposed development is in the county with access only through the city of Asheville. Please ask the new members to review the updated Buncombe County Sustainability Plan. The plan's vision statement includes the following. The plan was developed to guide our growing community towards a more sustainable, improved quality of life. We are part of a community and environmentally conscious economy that is stable and diverse. We have a strong sense of place and continue to work to preserve our distinctive landscape and culture. We are committed to continually improving our community for the betterment of future generations. The plan's sustainability goals include the following: conservation and restoration of natural resources, pollution and waste prevention, accessible and efficient transportation network. Included in the accessible and efficient transportation network is the goal of reducing the rate of increase of annual vehicle miles traveled. The plan includes many proposed goals and objectives. I believe any members appointed to these new boards for the community of Woodfin and surrounding neighbors would benefit from reviewing, adopting many of these goals. I believe that the proposed development, the Bluffs, will have a negative impact on our distinctive landscape and a very negative impact on the health and safety of our environment and our residents. It will certainly increase the rate of vehicle miles traveled. I'm a resident of Asheville on Richmond Hill Drive, and I'm concerned about the quality of life for myself, my family, and my neighbors. I'm concerned about the lack of infrastructure to support the development of a project of this size. The addition of thousands of private vehicles, if the development moves forward as proposed, creates a public health safety concern for current residents and the possible new residents of the proposed development. For these reasons, no construction must be permitted until the proper permitting for the proposed bridge to access the area is obtained and construction started. Once the bridge is completed, there must be an agreement that the access to the property via Richmond Hill Drive is closed except for emergency use only. Please include this letter into the record.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to new business. First item is a monthly report from the ABC board. Bradley?
April was another good month for sales. However, we were down 10%. But that compares with April of prior year of being up 57%. So even though a lot of bars, restaurants, event centers are opening up, you're feeling it in a fairly modest way. So I hope that keeps up. I understand from Tammy, the store manager, that this month is coming along pretty well. I understand that all of you received a budget for 21, 22. Please disregard that. That shouldn't have been sent out. It's a work in progress. As a matter of fact, the board has a work session scheduled for this coming Monday. One other invited guest is Dan Mullen, who's our auditor. But we have some questions about it, and it's definitely a work in progress. Sorry about that. It shouldn't happen. Construction, we're scheduled to start the second week in June. Finally be able to see something. Looking forward to it. One other piece of news of note, we'll be open on Memorial Day. Some of the ABC stores, Asheville, some others are not open. We will be if anybody has a need. The last time there were some questions about our cash balance. Our current cash balance is $657,000 in round figures, and that includes the $367,400 for construction. So the cash balance toward working capital is about $515,000. I'm prepared. I got some paper here. Y'all scared me last time. Now, do you dare ask me a question?
I was gonna say, save yourself some energy and just email Don Inslee all that information, okay?
I really relaxed when I got here and saw his seat was empty.
Yeah, did you? That's good. Well, that way you know the score.
Oh, well, I appreciate the interest. They were pertinent questions.
Oh, yeah, he's good with numbers.
Unless there are any other questions.
I don't think
Thank you very much.
Thank
may I
you.
be excused?
Yes, sir. Next item, recommended FY 21-22 budget. Mr. Hardy.
Sure, thank you, Mayor Vihan. So tonight, we're bringing to you the recommended budget for fiscal year 21-22 that begins July 1st. This document and these set of numbers and this recommendation is a result of two meetings we've had with you all as a body. We've covered a lot of ground in our discussions, and so you'll see a lot of those guidance that you provided to town staff embodied in this recommendation. And this would be sets us up for a public hearing in June at the next regular meeting, June 15th. And then that would be, hopefully, we would request an adoption, a vote on the adoption of the budget at that time. but you all do have until June 30th to make that decision. And so this is the unveiling, as it were, of the budget itself. We'll start with the big picture at the high level. So what you have here is a point in time, year 21, the projection as of a couple of weeks ago. That number will have changed by the time our finance director goes over some numbers later this evening. So at that point in time, we were projecting revenues and expenditures, revenues and excessive expenditures of about $600,000. A portion of that is for PAL bill funding, which we'll come back to in a little bit, about $200,000 of that. And that is provided for context when looking at the 2022 budget, we're looking at an increase to $6.2 million overall in that balanced budget. So now we'll take a step back and we'll go through some of the detail on that. This is the highlight of the sum total of the revenues in general fund and the trend over the 5 years. And you'll see then the increase for the current year. Then we'll come back to more detail and we'll just keep digging deeper and deeper into the details here. Property tax is the single most prominent and major revenue source for general fund activities. And what we have here is the line you obviously see go up for fiscal year 2022. There's two lines there. The dotted line is what we would call the revenue neutral revenue figure. And what that does not mean is that revenue in the next year would be equal to the revenue of this year. What that does do is take into consideration the average growth for the last 4 years since the revaluation for county property and property in Woodfin, and then takes that and says, then if we realize that amount of growth, this is what we might expect next year. And that total is about $3.3 million. The recommended budget is projected to bring in $3.57 million. Current tax rate is 33 cents. The revenue neutral tax rate is 30.1 cents. And so we are proposing to hold the budget tax rate flat. The other major revenue source is sales and use tax. And we've been talking through our various meetings this year about the trend, surprising trend upward in sales tax, even despite the pandemic. Next year is a modest increase over the current year, but you can see year over year, we've experienced double-digit growth in the last, many of the last years. And next year projections is more modest, 2.5% over what we currently have received this year. This is a look at all the revenues by category, where you can see in the column that is under fiscal year 21, that is the projected budget we just talked about on the revenue side by those particular categories of revenue. And then beside that is the base budget. So these are the things that ordinarily we would see some changes up and down. So nothing that is significantly a departure from prior years. And that amount is $5.6 million in total revenue, which includes an appropriation of fund balance of $225,010 that we'll come back to. Then the expansion budget, this would include the additional revenue that would be realized from the non-revenue neutral, holding the tax rate flat. That would be the amount over that, which is about $280,000. We also have in that category grants that we'll talk about in a moment for rollout carts for both recycling and trash. And some additional sales and services. So those are rental income for Silver Line Park once that opens. So those two combined, the base budget and the expansion budget together is the $6.2 million roughly in revenue budget recommended for fiscal year 22. On the expenditure side, looking again at the 5 years, most recent years, including the projected expenditure for the current year, which is down from the prior year for a few reasons. We have been rather conservative in some respects in spending relative to COVID, and we're not wanting to exceed our means there. But the most significant part of that is the deferral of some PAL bill spending that we ordinarily would have of about $200,000. And we're going to combine that to next year. And so that will roll to fund balance this year, and then we'll appropriate that next year, combine that with next year's distribution on PAL bill and the other item that we talked about that we'll get into in a moment, the increased investment in streets. The darker block there on top of the column on the right, that is the expansion budget. And that is about $1 million, is actually $1,035,910. You all did receive the detailed packet or with your packet that was delivered to you on Friday. For anyone in the public wishing to look at any of the details, we have that here. Feel free to inquire of the clerk on that and or me. And we'll go through that. Do you want to talk just briefly about the increase over the current year's budget or expenditure, the projected expenditures, and next year's base budget? So some decisions were made in the current year. And that's what is depicted on this particular slide here. There are some decisions and commitments that were made in this current year that will start off next year at a higher level. And those significant ones, and the three there primarily increase was about $770,000. $664,000 of that are represented by these items here. So as you know, we sold $3 million of general obligation bonds that were authorized by the voters in 2016. The debt service for that next year is just under $250,000. Salary and benefits for mid-year hires. So as you know, we added a planning director, a finance director, and 2 police sergeants during this year. So 4 positions. So the full year of those in excess of what we'd spent this year would be $194,000. That includes salaries and benefits. And then I've already mentioned that we're not using the PAL bill money this year. We're putting that together for a package that we want to bid out next year and get a little more favorable pricing ideally. And that we are a larger investment in streets going forward. So that appropriation that we did spend this year will be appropriate again next year. And then there's just some offsetting revenue for expenditures related to Silver Line Park. But that again, that's an expansion item, or that's something that's new and kind of exciting to us too. So that's why that's shown here. The expansion budget on the expenditure side, this is some categorization of those particular items. There were probably 25 of those in total. Probably the most significant one is we had talked about investing $1 million additional to PAL bill funds next year. We would go into debt by plan for that. And then the debt service, if we issue that late in the year, would only be the interest cost for 6 months. So that's the $10,000. So if you think about that over a 10-year period of time, that's what we're probably looking at. There'll be about $100,000 in debt service thereafter every year. Sanitation. So this is the portion that we talked about.
And that, excuse me for interrupting, that is just for the streets that we already are committed to paving.
So as
This isn't any plans for future. It's just
that is
what we
correct.
already have to.
That's correct. So over the years, there have been about 35 to 40 miles of streets that have been taken to they've been petitioned of the town to take those over from
Right.
maintenance. And so those are for those streets.
So-
Exactly right. And then we have gone through a pavement condition survey this year to
Mhm.
objectively look at the
Yeah.
street segments.
So you're prioritizing and getting,
Prioritize those
okay.
based on the condition. And these are ones in need of pretty substantial repair. So
Okay.
not simple maintenance to prolong the life, but really to
Right.
to fix those, the potholes and alligators.
These are the ones though that we have, that we're already committed to.
These are the
yeah.
these are ones we talked about last time.
Yes.
And I think these are the ones that our plan would indicate we need to commit to.
Yes, okay. I just wanted to be
And,
sure.
You all gave some feedback on that we need to move forward. So that's what you see in this
Yep.
budget.
Okay.
Sanitation, we talked about rollout cards for both recycling and sanitation.
Yes,
To the extent that we can secure grants, we will pay and purchase those.
that's
If we do
great.
not receive those grants, we will not be rolling that out. No pun intended next year. For parks, so we have in this recommended budget, we have a contribution from general fund of just under $150,000 for parks to fund that project. In addition to that, then there's some general maintenance costs associated with the operation of Silver Line Park once that opens. That's in this budget. Heavy equipment and vehicles. So we have 4 patrol vehicles, 4 police that are leased vehicles. Those costs are included here. There are also some public works equipment included in here, which include a grappling truck. We financed that. So that's the debt services included in this, as well as a backhoe for public works and a replacement vehicle for code enforcement. For facilities, we have $160,000 here. And the biggest portion of that is we had talked about replacement potentially for town hall. And so when we had our discussion 2 weeks ago, we looked at 12% of that estimated budget and going by $327 per square foot, which was a number that we got from the county based on their recent experience. 12% of that was nearly $500,000, and you all fell out of your chairs. It wasn't intended to commit and obligate us to moving forward with architecture through architecture. Really, the decision point was we would like to commission a feasibility study about the needs for town hall. What do we need out of a facility? Is this the site, the appropriate site? Are there other sites that might be considered and what might be best for the town to provide you all options? So we would come back with you at the conclusion of that study. So that is intended to, that's captured here. That's $90,000 or 2% of that anticipated construction budget for that.
What's, okay, the amount is 160,000.
And the others are the salt storage shed.
Okay, so
public
that
works,
does, okay,
60,000.
so we are going to replace that.
Yes, ma'am. And then 10,000 to fence, put a fence around the facility down there at Public Works and secure that site.
And go back to the park investments. I remember we had in one of the grants that we had to allot 45,000 a year in maintenance for a staff person to monitor the parks. And I didn't know if we were going to run that through maintenance. What is in that 187,000? I'm just,
187,000 would include, let's see. So as I mentioned, it's $140,000. 580 is a transfer from the general fund revenues of next year toward the project.
okay,
The
that's,
lion's share of that.
that is, so that's just moving
Yes.
money. Yeah, okay.
26,000 in operation. So that is for park maintenance, overtime.
So that's probably the extra hours that it's going to take personnel to monitor. Okay, that's kind of,
And then we have landscaping that we want to maintain.
right,
We have
that's,
some
yes,
buildings that we'll want
that,
to.
I get that.
And
That
then-
transfer of money is what I just couldn't figure out. Okay.
And what we anticipated was we had $1.5 million remaining in our general obligation bond authorization.
Yes,
So if we issue those next year, the interest income for the interest expense for that for half a year would be the other $20,000.
okay,
So that's-
that makes sense, yeah.
And those details also were included in your packets. Commissioner Hensley was requesting this detail with some
Yes.
columns like a yes, no, need more
Yes.
information. So that the full detail is in your packets there.
Some of the funding, I hope, will come back from the general service bond to the town.
Say it again.
Some of the funding for some of these will come back out of the bond
Come back.
to the town,
Reimbursed.
reimburse the town.
I see what you're saying. So we have some grant sources that will come
Yeah.
back. There'll be reimbursement.
Right.
funds.
Yeah.
And primarily the TDA is the one that comes to mind. Is the most material.
Did you want that checkoff list completed?
No, this is for your use. This is for your benefit. If you wish to use it that way, that's for you to decide
Okay,
how you want to view those and consider those. If you do need more information, this is just a worksheet for you.
okay. I didn't know exactly.
No. no.
That was good the way you had it listed though.
Well, that's what Commissioner.
You
Hensley-
did
we've
very
already
good.
heard about
Yes,
this.
absolutely.
He's very demanding
So,
for the reason. So we talked about facilities, a stormwater program. So we have $85,000 there for, that is a beginning budget for future stormwater expenses that we expect will come in over time, much higher than that. Just reading the tea leaves on that, but that is simply an additional investment of $50,000 of assets. So replacement of culverts, repairing dredging ditches, storm drain improvements. So that's 50,000 of that. So that increases about double what we currently spend on stormwater improvements, which are reactive in nature. So if we have something that fails, we go and repair it. This actually is beginning to put a little bit more funds together to address those things before they collapse and
And when is our stormwater plan due?
We submitted a plan to.
So we already did submit that.
To the,
Okay,
to the state.
okay,
They would like more detail in that plan.
yes,
So another $25,000 of this includes some additional assistance to develop the plan.
okay. And what was the timeline for that?
We don't have.
We don't have one. We just have to get it back to them.
We've been notified that it was inadequate,
right.
insufficient, and so we will be needing to get that back to them. What we are doing is getting the stormwater asset inventory completed. Once we know what assets are included in the town's obligation. that
Right.
Portfolio, we'll know also what the condition is, and that will help inform that plan. And return that to the state in just a better plan.
Because 85,000 seems kind of low,
And that's so right. So.
Yeah.
yes.
but it's a starting point.
It's a starting point. Included in the expansion budget is a 3% cost of living adjustment for all town staff. That is based on the consumer price index, and that has been really volatile, especially the last 2 or 3 months. If we looked at December year over year, it was 1.45% CPI increase. We look at March over March, it was about 3%. We look at April over April, it was close to 5%. So initially, we were thinking that might be a 2.5% cost of living adjustment. We bumped that up to 3% for the purposes of this expansion budget for your consideration. Other operating items. Other operating items total $62,000. It's a change there. What we're doing is we're building into the budget now $30,000 for legal expenses and legal consultation for our land use matters. That's an expenditure that, on advice of your council, we have started to incur some of those costs this year. So that is just ensuring that we have sufficient funds next year to support our planning and zoning staff, as well as our boards. And then also we have $30,000 there for a mowing contract for the interchanges at Newbridge. So we are obligated to maintain those on behalf of DOT because the town agreed to some additional landscaping items in those islands. So that's $30,000. We've got 3 quotes, and that's the lower of the quotes, or most of the quotes. So that is about all that we have there. And then we also have some permitting software. We do not currently have a database of the permits that are issued by the town. So this will move us in the right direction there. Also, we'll replace our server to handle our data. So anyway, those are rather modest costs, but rather critical town operations. The total expansion here, $1,035,905. We have talked through, we do have a great deal of deferred maintenance throughout town, through our facilities, with our equipment, and also now with streets, as we know better. And we're beginning to pick away now at stormwater. We know that that's one that's on the horizon. So that's what this expansion budget is intended to do. Putting it all together, then we have the fiscal year 21 projection that we talked about with the base budget, the expansion budget, which brings us to the balanced budget for the recommended amount of $6.2 million and some change. Going forward, and we've already talked about it a little bit, and Vice Mayor Tanner, you brought up stormwater. So we know that there's likely to be a significant investment required in future years. And we'll be talking later tonight about fund balance and the use of fund balance and the need for fund balance. So having reserves in order to address some of those matters and perhaps mitigate some of those expenditures that will be coming. This is one that has us concerned and has all of us concerned, you all in addition. We know that we will probably be coming back with a second round of significant investment for street maintenance. The first tranche of money will take care of the streets that are the lowest state of repair. That will probably happen over the next 18 months or so, those repairs. During that time, we'll have streets that are further deteriorating to the same condition. So that we would expect to see this again next year. We do have a $3.6 million funding gap remaining for the Greenway and Blue Way. We don't expect that will all come from the general fund and general fund revenues, but we just, as a reminder, we do have that gap outstanding. Talk about aging town facilities. Town hall is not in the best of condition and is bursting at the seams now that we've added a couple of positions. And Public Works site also is going to need some consideration, especially as I-26 is expanded. The good
Has the
news
town
is,
received any information about DOT?
not especially, and the mayor may have more insight into that too, as far as where that's going from the MPO. I think we're still several years off from that.
Okay,
We have the map, and we know that where lanes are going to be planned, at least 4 to 6 lanes to 8 lanes.
right.
And so that puts this particular site right in the pathway of some of that expansion. In Poplar Street in particular, and maybe another adjacent property.
Yeah. Okay, that's,
So the good news, and I think the thing that is on our minds also, and is not contemplated in this budget, and this will be a set of future decisions, will be the American Rescue Plan. The town is earmarked currently to receive nearly $2 million over the next, to be used over the next 4 years. Our finance director will go over more detail on that this evening, and some items that'll be of import to you.
Good thing, yeah.
It is. So that is the recommended budget. The budget calendar. Tonight, we are hearing for the first time and talking about the recommended budget in total, though we've talked about components of it over the last couple of months. At this point in time, unless you all tell me differently, I don't have a need to talk with you in another work session, but we do have that placeholder. If you would like to reconvene June 1st, we can certainly do that. If you have questions that you want to talk through, of course, individually, we can do that. But as a group, if you'd like to, we've had that as a placeholder. And then working toward June 15th for the public hearing and the adoption of the budget, ideally.
I just have one question on the expansion budget. Say, we don't use the exact amounts for each topic, okay? Are you going to be able to move money around some?
Yes.
Okay, so that would just be, you would do a budget amendment.
So the budget ordinance that you'll consider in June specifies the amount that can be moved and under what circumstances. And then, so that will be a decision point for you.
Okay, just as long, I mean, if we say we're going to spend this amount, but it might be that we have different amounts in each category.
Absolutely.
So you can
do
adjust.
budget amendments or transfers within the budget.
Okay.
Some will be by, at least the ordinance would be that we could do staff side.
Yeah.
But those that are material will come back to you all.
Okay. I think you did a really good workshop with the budget before, so I'm kind of in agreement. We don't need another 4-hour session. So
4 hours.
I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Food was wonderful. Yes, dessert was wonderful. Strawberry shortcake, yeah.
You're recommending a public hearing be
So that'll be the action,
up to date,
June 15th.
June 15th.
Yes, sir.
Next meeting.
Yeah,
Yes,
everybody in agreement with that?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
next we'll schedule that public hearing for June 15th.
Be fine.
Okay, next item is the fund balance policy. Sherry?
Good evening.
Good evening.
At the May 4th work session, we discussed with the board our desire to establish a fund balance policy. In your packet, you have a copy of the requested policy and an associated resolution adopting policy for your consideration. We spent a good bit of time reviewing guidance from the LGC, from the government finance organizations, and lots of other municipal policies were reviewed in order to come to sort of a consensus on what we thought were the correct, the right language and the correct percentages to put in our policy. I feel that this policy gives you all, it protects the citizens in that it establishes a healthy minimum fund balance for the town, but it also gives the board flexibility to, when things arise that you need extra money for, to have the ability to pull from fund balance when it's needed. And it sets a ceiling for fund balance so that in lucrative times for the town, we're mindful that if fund balance reaches a certain point, we need to begin to pay down debt and do things that'll save more money in the long run. So I think that overall, this is a good conservative policy for the town. These are some of the slides that we reviewed at the workshop that give you some information on why fund balance is important. We want to maintain a contingency for rainy day scenarios or unforeseen things. It helps our credit worthiness with lenders or rating agencies, so that if you have a healthy fund balance consistently over time, that helps your credit score. Basically, it saves money as far as being able to pay for capital projects and needs of the town instead of financing when you have enough savings in hand to do some of those things. So this is the summary slides that we reviewed at the last workshop. I reviewed the 5-year scenario a little bit. My net change in fund balance projected for this year is a little different than the one Eric just reviewed, primarily for the reason he discussed. My estimates don't back out the Powell bill spending for this year. So if you take that $175,000 to $200,000 into account, our numbers are pretty much the same. In this scenario, it shows this number here in this middle column is total fund balance. We deduct from that anything any reserved fund balance, things like Powell bill, unauthorized substance tax, money that has come to us from outside places that is reserved for a certain purpose has to be reserved and can't be used in that calculation. So this sets aside those funds and calculates the percentages based on unrestricted fund balance. The next slide shows you how in our audit reports and financial statements, we calculate that unreserved fund balance. The total ending fund balance at the end of last fiscal year was a little over $3 million, $3,060,000. We subtracted from that the $393,000 in restricted fund balance. Most of that was Powell bill. We had a little money for the police department's unauthorized substance tax funds that have to be spent on law enforcement purposes. And then the state stabilization, which is a statutory requirement that we have to calculate and reserve a very small portion of our budget each year. You get unrestricted fund balance from there. From unrestricted balance, we have other commitments, things that the board that are discretionary for you all, but you've either indicated a desire to reserve funds for certain purposes. And some examples of that are set asides for bond payment and those kinds of things. So that's just sort of an example of how fund balance is calculated. The policy goes into detail about the different levels of fund balance and how the reserved areas are described for you to review. Some of the neighbors and how we compare. Black Mountain is one of our closest neighbors. Their minimum fund balance policy is 30%. Weaverville is, their policy reads 20 to 40% as a minimum, depending on a few other things. Biltmore Forest, I think Montreat also is 25 to 35%. Buncombe County is a lot less, at 15%, but their budget is a lot larger than a smaller town. So 15% of the county's budget is the size.
A lot more money for them.
But that's sort of how we compare to our closest neighbors.
So we have about 57%.
We're projecting at the end of the year to have about 62%.
But that doesn't take out that Powell bill, right?
It does.
Oh, it does. Okay. So we're at 62%. Okay.
Yeah, that's where and likely that's a conservative estimate of where we'll be. We'll likely be 1% or 2 higher, but that's the ballpark. We're in between the target of 50% and the ceiling of 70 that we're under this policy. So we're in a really good place. So if there are not any questions from the board, our request is that you all adopt the proposed resolution.
They have a motion to adopt the fund balance policy.
I move.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
It's good.
Done.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, next item, 160D text amendment and adoption. Adrian?
Okay, so these are the ordinance amendments to the zoning and subdivision ordinances related to the new 160D land use legislation at the state level. This was presented to the Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment at the beginning of this month, and they recommended approval. So just to remind you a little bit about the background about 160D, there used to be two separate chapters for cities and towns and counties. Cities and towns were 160A and counties were 153A, planning and development regulation statutes. Most of the information was identical, so they took this opportunity to consolidate those chapters into one chapter and reorganize it. So it's a little bit more user-friendly. While most of it is just reorganization and consolidation, there is some further clarification on some land use practices, and we're taking this opportunity to update our ordinance to provide for that authority at the local level. So the local ordinance updates are required by July 1st of this year. That used to be January 1st of this year until COVID happened, and they extended it to July 1st. So that's why we're here tonight, to make sure that happens before July 1st. So we were able to contract with the School of Government to do a code scan on those changes. So staff made the initial recommendations and sent it to the School of Government for review. We got their feedback and changes back, made those changes, and now we have presented it to the planning board, and we're here tonight to present it to you, but also to request adoption of the changes. So we did take this opportunity to do some general reorganization, not necessarily related to 160D, but if you can see on the PowerPoint slide there on the right-hand side, the general zoning districts used to be just a lot of jumbled words. So we took the chance to make tables for each district for their permitted uses and the dimensional requirements for each district. So that's how that's laid out in the main text of the ordinance. We also took the permitted uses table that was in the ordinance and put it in the appendix and reorganized it to be categorized by use. So if you want to know where a kennel is allowed in town, you can go to the permitted uses table and find it under the business category in the permitted uses table. But if you want to know what the setbacks are for your house in an R7, you can go to the R7 district and the table's there for you. So it's just kind of an easy, user-friendly format. Some of the simple things we did, we changed the statutory citations from 168 to 160D. What you know as conditional use is now referred to universally as special use. So we changed we changed conditional use to special use, but we also made sure that the special use approval process applies only to those uses listed as special use in the permitted uses chart. So we did remove the requirement for height of a building to need a special use permit, because that's not the point of a special use by the statute. So we're trying to be consistent with what the statute is requiring us to do. We also consolidated the board language. So right now we have the Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment, and we had language about the roles and responsibility of that board in the zoning ordinance, but also in chapter 2 of the code book. And that didn't need to be there. So we moved it to the zoning ordinance and reformatted that section. So it's all in the zoning ordinance now. So chapter 2 effectively should be repealed because there's nothing else in it. It was just Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment. We also had a reference to the mountainous residential zoning district. It's not on the zoning map. As far as I know, it's never been used, so we took this opportunity to remove that from the ordinance. We updated the definition section. There were several definitions that weren't relevant to the ordinance, but there were a lot of definitions missing that were relevant to the ordinance. There were a lot of definitions related to signs, which is a separate section of the code. So we removed those and we replaced them with definitions of most of the permitted uses listed in the permitted uses table and other definitions that we need for zoning interpretation. So we spent a lot of time on that. And in addition, one of the things 160D requires is that the definition of building, dwelling, and dwelling unit be consistent with state statute. So we removed the definition that was there and replaced it with the verbatim statute definition. We also included a definition of familial relationship close in response to the broad and conflict of interest standards. So the broad and conflict of interest standards, we included provisions for planning staff, planning board, and the Board of Adjustment related to conflicts of interest. Previously, the main standard for a conflict of interest was readily identifiable financial impact. But that was broadened to include the close familial, business, or other associational relationship. So if staff, a planning board member, or Board of Adjustment have a conflict of interest in either financial impact or a close relationship, they shouldn't make a decision or vote on a decision. If there's an issue with a board member who does have a conflict of interest that refuses to recuse themselves, there is each board has a provision to say the majority membership of the board can vote on whether or not that person needs to participate. Some of the things we changed in the administrative section, more related to 160D, we added a provision about permit choice rules. This is state statute, so we would have to follow it anyway, but we kind of wanted a cheat sheet for staff and for the community to understand what the rules are. So we added a provision about permit choice. So that means if an application is submitted and before the approval happens, if the rules change, then the applicant can pick which set of rules apply to their application. And that choice option is valid for 18 months after application submittal. We also have defined site plan and what the requirements for a site plan are, specific to special use permits approvals and conditional zoning approvals. We'll get to conditional zoning here in a minute, and I'll explain what that means. But now we know what the developer is going to be required to submit on their site plan for those two approvals. We've added a provision about completeness review. So this kind of goes back to the permit choice rules. So we know what it means if somebody's submitted a complete application, and it provides direction to staff on what to do if they haven't. So there's some timelines involved, and we can tell the developer this is not complete. You'll have to resubmit at a later date.
And fees have to be paid.
Fees have to be paid. And the required form has to be submitted. And the information that we lay out that we require in your site plan has to be there.
So just because they come in and talk to you doesn't mean,
Right.
yeah, okay.
We also have identified site-specific vesting plans to apply to those same approvals, special use permits, conditional zoning approvals, and as well as subdivision plat approvals. So that means the permit is valid for 2 years. Most zoning approvals are valid for 1, but with these bigger approvals, it gives the developer an opportunity to not have to go back through the entire process of approval if it takes them a little bit to get the project started. So we have, in the current ordinance, we have authority for a planning and zoning board of adjustment, which combines the planning board and the board of adjustment, which are laid out separately in statute. So their roles and responsibilities are laid out separately. And It's best practice for them to be separate boards because they do different things. And having one board can be overwhelming to the volunteers that participate on those boards. So I'm recommending splitting the boards into a planning board and a board of adjustment. So the planning board is an advisory board, so they're going to be offering recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on text amendments, map amendments, subdivision plats, and rezoning applications, and providing a facilitation method for citizen engagement in planning, so long-term planning, and they'll do that kind of thing. All of their recommendations will come to you for final decision. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi judicial board. They're going to be hearing three things: appeals of the zoning administrator, variance requests, and special use permits. So I'm recommending 2 5-member boards with 2 alternates each. And again, all that language has been consolidated into the zoning ordinance and consistent with statute language. So we're taking this opportunity to introduce conditional zoning districts. So what a conditional zoning district is essentially a rezoning as you would know it, but has conditions with it. It can have conditions with it. So the way that we're introducing it is to allow a conditional district in any general use district we already have, as long as the requirements that are laid out are met. So an applicant can come in and propose a plan based on the base district, the setbacks of that district, the uses of that district, the density of that district, but can have a conversation with the board about having smaller setbacks or having a different use or the layout configuration of their development. So it allows for some flexibility. We are allowing it to be an option for approval in any district, but we're requiring this process for Mountain Village approvals. So we have laid out in the ordinance specific site plan requirements and site analysis requirements that have to happen for this process to work. So the way it works is the developer would come in with an initial meeting with staff to kind of go over the concept of what they're planning on doing, and we would kind of direct them on where we think it will go or what other information that we might need for them to come through the formal review process. After that meeting, if the property abuts a residential district, or there's going to be a traffic impact analysis required, a public information meeting is required to happen that's handled by the person developing the property. So they notice the neighbors that would be noticed for a general map amendment, which is all the neighbors within 150 feet, to have this public meeting to talk about what their proposal is going to be, to get feedback from them, make the changes to their site plan or whatever it is, and then come back to staff with a formal review. That meeting is also required if the traffic impact analysis is required, which is required when it's estimated that peak hour trips will exceed 200 or total daily trip volume will exceed 2,000. So if it's abutting a residential district or a traffic impact analysis is required, then they have to do the public information meeting. After all that's met, they'll come back to staff with their formal site plan for final review before it goes to the planning board, who will then recommend to the Board of Commissioners, just like a regular rezoning process. We're also
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
Okay, so say someone has 5 acres of land and they sell it to a developer. And it's already zoned. Say it's zoned half acre for individual homes. That isn't really, they're not really, because it isn't Mountain Village, they don't really fall in the conditional district, right? Or when they bring to the site plan here, I mean,
The conditional district happens after it's approved, it becomes a conditional district. So it is a
Okay.
map amendment, but it's specific to that individual property.
okay.
So they're in their own little zoning district based on the decisions that were made in their site plan submittal and approval by the Board of Commissioners.
But why would a developer want to take that on? Why would a developer want to fall into the conditional district? Because you're going to be requiring more rules.
Because
I'm just asking because I'm trying to,
they may not want to take it on, and they don't have to take it on. They
They don't
could,
have
they
to
could go
take
through
it.
the basic rezoning process. It's just an option.
well, and if,
for developers that are ready to submit their site plan and kind of know where they're going with it.
right, okay. Okay, I was just, it's new.
Yeah, and it's all really, all of this is really just additional opportunities for approval that are more transparent to the public and involve planning board and board of commissioners decisions.
If they want to.
If they want to.
Participate,
Right.
which personally, I don't know why they would want to.
If we don't have it in the ordinance, they can't. So you may have developers that would want to, and if we don't have it
Yeah, okay,
provided for, then they
Okay.
can go through the process.
got it.
What would make you want, what would make a developer want to do that? What's an example? of that?
Especially, yeah, just give me a,
Because it's it's a rezoning that could have conditions with it. So you could,
but if you
Yeah.
don't have to ask for rezoning, if
Then
you're
you-
already zoned, like I said, you bought 5 acres of property and it's already zoned, you could
you
put it,
don't need the rezoning. You're not, you're gonna
You really
submit the plan to staff and get your approval.
right, okay.
But if you have a property that you might want a little bit of flexibility in what
So
the
the-
zoning ordinance requires, you would go through this process to get.
So this is really only if you need to ask for rezoning. If the,
Yes.
yes, okay. I'm just trying to get in my head.
This is taking the rezoning process and the conditional use process and combining it
Yes,
so that you can rezone a property while placing conditions.
and I'm
on
with
that
you now. So, but basically, if you purchase and it's already zoned correctly, they don't have to come in and do this.
Correct.
They just need to come and get a permit and let you know what
This is
they're
not a
like.
have-to thing. This is-
Exactly. And it's really just if they need to rezone.
Right.
Okay, I'm with you.
So along those same lines, we're introducing development agreements, which is another approval tool that you could use that you don't have to use, but if you don't have it in your ordinance, it can't be used. So
Okay.
we're taking this opportunity to introduce that if somebody wanted to use it.
Okay,
But this is for long-term, large-scale, multi-phase developments. So the developer comes in with a proposal, has a discussion with staff. They talk about, it's all in a formal agreement, what's gonna happen on that property. So we have a master plan submittal requirement for this, but everything else is not gonna necessarily be on a site plan. It's gonna be written out in an agreement that happens between the Board of Commissioners and the developer. So the agreement might cover land use intensities, heights, density, other development standards, setbacks, whatever it is that the developer proposes and the board agrees on.
and the majority of large developments are going to be Mountain Village, which automatically would be required for the conditional district. And this too.
Right now, but that could change, and then we would have this
Okay.
option there.
Okay.
The new statute allows for administrative minor modifications. So again, this is for approvals for conditional zoning districts and special use permits. So if a developer comes in and gets or property owner, whoever it is, comes in and gets an approval, either one of these ways, and then they decide they want to change it slightly. If we don't list this out in our ordinance, they'll have to go back through the whole process. So we're recommending to add the ability for staff to make minor modifications to already approved projects.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So we couldn't change the use or the density of the project, but we could change minor site design, building layout, or road configuration. And then there's the 4 categories listed there. And specifically how much we can change on those categories. We can't go above that.
So that keeps it minor.
There's clarification provided on the performance guarantees, which are proof from the developer that they're going to finish a project even though after final approval, even though they haven't finished it yet. So it comes in the form of a surety bond or a letter of credit or cash. So the statutes clarify that the subdivider has to be able to elect the type of guarantee used. So we added that language. The cost can exceed 125% of the estimated project cost, but it must cover all associated costs. So we've added the language of the statute regarding that. We also added language on the release of the guarantee. So the release happens when the improvements are complete based on Board of Commissioners approval that they're complete. But the security may be extended or renewed if the board so chooses. The statutes clarify that the performance guarantee option can be used for zoning approvals as well. Previously, it was just subdivision approvals, but it can now be used for zoning. So we've added a reference to this language in the zoning ordinance if the board thinks that's necessary for certain approvals. And then we did make a couple changes to the subdivision ordinance. So we defined minor and major subdivisions that wasn't previously defined. So a minor subdivision is less than 4 lots with no new roads, no new utilities, and it's all single family homes. Major subdivisions is everything else. So we changed the approval process for minor subdivisions to be administrative with feedback from a technical review committee consisting of fire department, water department, whoever needs to be on that committee, stormwater. And then the major subdivisions will go through the general planning board, Board of Commissioners process.
What is considered a lot? You said less than 4 lots. For home site, 4 acres, what is?
4 lots that meet the zoning requirements of that district on an individual parcel that they're subdividing.
So it has to do with the zoning already on the, okay, that's what I'm just checking. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Just like I mentioned in the zoning ordinance for the completeness language of the application, we added that same language to the subdivision ordinance for plats. We did add a concept plan option. So what would be required on a submitted concept plan for staff review if anybody wanted to use that before they go through the formal process. And then last random thing, they changed the language in the statutes about requiring power lines to be buried. So you can't require power lines to be buried if they were already there or if they extend off the site that's being subdivided. So we amended that language in our ordinance. And with that, I'll take any questions. So what I'm asking you to do tonight is to repeal the current zoning ordinance and adopt the new ordinance in its place.
Any questions from anybody? Heard Adrian's recommendation. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to repeal the old ordinance, I guess we call it, and install the new one that Adrian has come up with.
Have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
You did a lot of hard work. Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you. No, we can't forget that a lot of these ordinances were written in 1972.
Yes, yes.
And there haven't been many revisions made since then.
Did you help out?
It's gonna be an uphill battle for several years.
Okay, next item is appointment of members to the Planning and Zoning Board and appointment of a chairperson. Okay, that's the first.
Got bad luck.
Split up into two different items here.
So the first one is the planning board.
First one, the Planning Board.
So we interviewed several applicants this afternoon for these appointments. And we're going to be recommending 5 appointments to each board with 1 alternate on each board. So I think you have the list.
Yeah.
So we'll just need to appoint the 5 members and the chairperson, and then I'll follow up with them about the next steps.
Yeah, each one of them's got 5 people and 1 alternate. And here's who we came up with, and if anybody decides, I say Ronnie and Adrian and myself interview, how many did we interview? 9 or 10 this afternoon.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the planning board, we came up with, and these are not ranked any particular way other than for let's see, for planning board, Jeff Angel, Barbara Lamb, Teresa Stoker, Jay Grimmett, Dylan Deckant, and Ellen Brown as an alternate. And we, one of the questions we ask all of them, if they'd be willing to serve as chair of these different 2 committees. And we came up with Teresa Stoker as the chairperson for the planning board. So
I discussed that with her as well, and she's willing.
So with that, do we have a motion to appoint the 5 members to the planning board with Teresa as the chair?
I can't vote on that. My son's
Yeah.
number 1.
Okay.
What are the terms of each one?
They're 3 years, but we need to appoint them in a staggered way. So Mayor Vihan was
That's what
talking
we're gonna
about,
do tomorrow. Just put them on the staggered terms.
but you wanted to appoint them in either July or you wanted to
January.
officially make that term official July 1st or January 1st.
So you're gonna designate which term they have tomorrow, you said?
Yeah, which is 3 years, which is 2 years, which is
That's right,
1 year.
that's right.
Time ran out on us today after the interview.
That's why I want to make sure that gets done, because that's necessary.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion to appoint these people to the planning board.
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, next item is appointment of members to the board of, and a chair to the Board of Adjustment. And following along with same procedure we used, if anybody let me stop right here just a minute and hunt the questions we used. You got a copy of those questions handy? Yeah, I've got one right here. We asked them 5 questions and then we took questions from them. First question was, why are you interested in volunteering for the planning board or the Board of Adjustment? What do you see as the biggest challenges for the town of Woodford? Are you able to commit to attending at least 1 meeting per month? do you understand there will be times when you disagree with a proposed development or may dislike a certain developer, but you have to approve the project if all the ordinance standards are met? And then are you willing to be a chairperson if you were asked to be? And then we took questions from them if they had anything. And for the Board of Adjustments, and here again, this is in no particular order. Victoria Clark, Patricia Hoffman, and we decided on her, she's a current member of the planning board, to be the chair of this group. Jeff Feist, Jim McAllister, Susanna Carver, and Glenda Overbeck as the alternate. So with that, do we have a motion to appoint these people to the Board of Adjustment?
They'll also be for 3-year terms.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then moving on to number 8, and if you tell me again how that's defined, Derek, please.
Consideration of an amendment to the personnel ordinance concerning deferred compensation. And finance director will be presenting.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, that's my slides are a little bit out of order. So this one is an amendment to the personnel ordinance, specifically Article 7, Section 4, which references deferred compensation, paragraph F. It's come to our attention that our practice, and I think the board's original intention, doesn't match the language in the personnel ordinance and our practice as we do business. The request is to, and you were given as a handout, it wasn't in your original package, but you were given a handout tonight that there's a staff report that lists exactly what we're wanting to change, the current language. Then there's a middle section that red lines and shows you the changes we'd like to make. And then it concludes with the new language for that section of the personnel ordinance. And the second part of the handout was an ordinance modifying the personnel policy for the town of Woodfin. So you all have all the details that we were asked to make this amendment on tonight. So basically, the language is a little outdated in our personnel ordinance, and it's not clear direction to staff and what benefit retirees that are eligible. Not everybody that retires is eligible to keep their health or their insurance benefits. But if you have worked enough years and you are eligible, at one time, some of the vision and dental benefits were blended in the health policy. Now with the new policy, they are not. So we purchased that separately. So things have gotten a little out of kilter with our ordinance over the years. So this is basically a housekeeping measure, but in order to clarify that language and to be clear and transparent that our ordinance agrees with what the benefit we're providing to eligible retirees, we're asking that you make these amendments tonight.
It would end at 65, right?
I'm sorry.
The benefit would end at age 65.
Yes, sir. All benefit ends for health insurance at age 65 of the retiree. If you worked, the current language of the policy, if you work 20 years or more with the town of Woodfin and you are eligible to retire under the guidelines of the North Carolina State Retirement System, you're eligible to keep the employees. We pay for the employees' health insurance until they reach age 65 and are eligible for Medicare. Dependent insurance can be kept, but that's at the cost of the retiree or the employee. And that matches the benefit we offer active employees. And it's similar in practice to what the county and the city and some of the other municipalities in this area provide their staff members. So I feel that it's reasonable.
I'm going through that now.
You're just a child.
We had that for a while and then it just
Dropped off
got
somehow.
dropped off. Didn't catch it for several
Pick
months.
it back up.
We have 6 retirees that are currently being provided health benefits. 4 have their COBRA benefits have expired, so they're more than 18 months past the retirement date, and 2 of those are still under COBRA, so they're on our town policy.
Okay, do we have a motion that we pick this back up
So move.
or adopt the personnel, the changes to the personnel plan? How do you want that worded, Jerry?
Yes, sir. Move that we adopt the amendments to the personnel ordinance.
Okay, you have a motion,
So move.
Motion.
second?
Second.
Any discussion? In favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay,
I'm the first staff report, so I'll just stay up here.
okay, moving on to departmental administrators reports.
Who shares first? Choose the-
She's up there.
Okay,
My slides in the wrong place.
go ahead.
I'll be quick because we've talked about most of this already. The first slide, we reviewed a lot of this with budget presentation and fund balance. The only other thing I'll call to your attention, at the end of April, we were $1.2 million ahead. We had collected more revenue than we had spent at that point in time, primarily because we were at, I think the percentage is 99.22% on our property tax collections at the end of April. And so we have 2 more months of expenditures that'll come after that, and that'll get us about to where the projected fund balance overage and revenue at the end of the year. So that's that. We do anticipate bringing a final budget amendment for the fiscal year before you for consideration next month at your board meeting. It's usually most municipalities at the end of the fiscal year, you have to do some housekeeping and align your actual experience and your revenue collections with the budget. And so we'll, if you looked at the line item detail provided in your packet, you'll see some of the lines are a little out of whack, and we anticipate cleaning that up at the next board meeting. So you'll have that to review. Another significant, which is, this is a good slide, I like talking about this one, is sales tax for this year. We collected through May
That's really.
1,113,000 in sales tax. That's 207% of what we budgeted. So we've done really good in the area of sales tax, and hopefully that trend will continue for the next year. There's more community, more businesses, more folks living in our area, so that really helps.
Yes.
That was an excellent error on the part of somebody with the county, not anybody from Woodford.
Sherry, any idea how'd that happen? I mean, where did the increase come from?
I looked at the, and I changed the slide up for this meeting to show you where we were for the previous couple of years. So the red line is 2019, the green one was last year, and that top blue line is this year. And, you know, there's more people in our community, more activity as far as, there's been a lot of construction and things in that area. We've had stimulus money that's been floating around. So I think all of those were a factor in helping the sales tax numbers, and hopefully that trend will continue and
That
continue to
went
aid in
from
our
a
budget.
35% estimated loss to a real nice
Yeah,
That really helped.
positive.
March a year ago, we were in trouble, big time. And
Yeah. So another thing that I'm really excited to talk about, and we mentioned it briefly earlier, is the latest round of stimulus, the American Rescue Plan Act, is the 1.9 to $2 million distribution that will be coming from the federal government for the town. Relatively soon, we'll receive the first distribution in a few weeks. We anticipate that in early June. And then the second distribution, the second half of that money, will be next year about the same time. That is a population-based, formula-driven grant from the federal government to keep the economy going and stimulate recovery from the Coronavirus Act. I listed here some broad categories that you're allowed to spend that money on. Eric mentioned earlier that we have 4 years to spend it, so we get it in June. We have until, I believe, December of 2024 to spend it all, so you all have a lot to consider, but it's a really good thing, and that'll help Whitman's bottom line and maybe some projects that we are in need of taking care of. It'll give us the means to take care of them without borrowing money, so,
We get it in 2 installments, right?
yes, sir. That's it. That's all I had for tonight.
I see stormwater infrastructure.
You do see that.
Yeah.
Where's that? Water hasn't been running. I haven't seen no rain.
Yeah, well.
No storm water.
That's temporary.
Yeah.
Okay, moving
Yeah, it
on
will- it will
to
come.
police report, chief.
Good evening. I will be pretty brief on mine. Taking a look at your numbers, you'll notice that our calls for service are slightly down from last year. Again, these always fluctuate depending on what's going on. However, our patrol activities have increased, citations are up. We're actually getting ready to start another Governor's Highway Safety campaign next week. Click it or ticket. So we remind folks, please wear your seatbelts because we will be out enforcing that. So buckle up, be safe. We have had something I do want to point out towards the bottom of patrol activities, overdoses. We have had responded to 2 overdoses last month. One of those actually being fatal. And so we're still working with the district attorney's office on that to pursue any relevant charges. But our team did a great job working with that, from the patrol officers to the detectives. And as I said, still working on it. So we always hate seeing things like that happen in our community, but I'm pleased with our response to that. Otherwise, our crash reports, something we look at, have increased slightly, 16 for this month as opposed to 13 this time last year. Again, last year at this time, we were in pretty heavy lockdown, not a lot of vehicle traffic. Things are starting to return to normal. But so we say that our numbers are actually, if we looked at the trends and kind of took last year out of it, we would be reduced. And I want to think that that's part to do with our increased traffic enforcement, the officers being visible, slowing traffic down, people are paying attention. So those crashes are going down. Otherwise, I really don't have anything significant to report. It's just been kind of a keeping our head down month and moving ahead. I did hear actually back today, or I'm sorry, yesterday, from Governor's Governor's Crime Commission. For that grant, we are proceeding into the next phase of that. So hopefully we will be able to continue with that, get those replacement radios, and then there would be a budget amendment at some point if we're approved for that, but we're still kind of early in the process. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions for chief?
No?
I saw some of the officers out at some of the gas pumps keeping things orderly. I thought that was good.
Yeah, unfortunately, due to the I hate calling it a shortage, the inflated crisis with gasoline that happened this past week. We did have to deal with traffic backing up at some of the gas stations as they received shipments of fuel. Hopefully, we are moving past that as the number of gas stations in the area are starting to have more gasoline, so less outages.
Hope so.
Need to. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, planning and zoning.
Enough from Adrian.
Oh, really?
She said she's had nothing else to report. She's kind of spent.
I guess we'll have to hear from you then, Eric.
I guess, and I don't have as much to report tonight as I ordinarily would myself, so we're moving along at a pretty good pace tonight, record time. No new contracts for the last month. So we have the 50th anniversary of this year of Woodfin, We have the publication that's underway. I don't know if Clint has anything that he'd like to say, if not, but if so.
No, I mean, I updated you if you saw anything besides commissioner. I asked for a couple of sentences. and-
We're gonna get them
Yeah,
to you.
They're in the works,
Oh,
aren't they?
yeah, we're getting them.
So, I was given a deadline. now, if you went in,
We have to have them by-
Friday.
Little single, we
It's
will
somewhere with
too.
Email it to Clint. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys need my email address right quick? Or do you know?
I know it.
it?
Yeah.
Anybody who don't. you can pass it on. That's all. Okay.
You can bring yours here if you want to.
We.
Eric will send it for you.
Yes, sure.
Yep.
We'll have a new website launched in the next few days.
Yay.
So we'll.
I hadn't even thought about
Report on that. Spring clean. So we talked about this last month, just another announcement and reminder. Next week is spring clean. So anything that is dragged to the street that is permissible, so no hazardous household waste.
What about empty paint cans?
If you think cans,
Fill them with straw, sand.
it's got to be dry. I think
Okay.
is the
But if
requirement
they're
there.
totally dry, they're okay.
They got paint in them, put sand in.
Sand in them? Does that dry up the paint?
So I would recommend looking at Buncombe County landfill, and they have instructions there as to how
Okay.
to dispose of those items.
What is it, $2 a gallon or something like that if they got paint in them?
If there's
I don't
liquid
know.
paint,
I didn't want to do anything wrong,
Site for
but
that?
I don't know. I know it's considered hazardous waste.
It is. So liquid paint obviously can't do.
but if you fill it up with sand, I'll go to the website. I'll go to the website.
Go to the web.
Eric, I do have
Go
one
with-
question. On the
Go see the
TV,
web.
how do we pay the $10? Say I set a TV out.
So this will be set out. So this is recycling. So Ike's Hauling is someone that we're contracting with.
Right.
Who will be coming to collect those items, and he will be setting up shop at the community center. You'll pay him,
I
and
got you.
then he pays that.
What the county's
Okay.
supposed to do is get your money. You know, they send out a letter.
Yes.
That's what.
You see the other
Thank
items
you.
disposed of there. So these are the hard to recycle items. And Ike's will be set up at the community center on the 24th during business hours.
Metal appliances. Take them to the community center. Okay.
Put in a can, what did he say?
Sand.
Sand.
So as you're on your way to recycle, don't forget, it's click it and ticket. Greenway and Blue Way. Few items to report, some updates and some good progress on the projects. Our Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee is now meeting regularly. We do have our chairman with us tonight. So Walt Brewer was selected as one by his peers to be the chairman of the committee. And Lucy Crown, who is the Greenways planner in the city of Asheville, is the vice chair. So I'm very happy with that, and a lot of enthusiasm among this group and a lot of energy and talent among this group as well. We set up two subcommittees, one for communications and marketing that just supports and helps our effort with Riverlink and our communications partner, and then also with project management. So to help us ensure that we've got the right structure in place, and we have additional sets of eyes and ears on the project as it proceeds. There are two leads that were appointed for each of those, again, from among the membership there. Coral Darby for communications of Darby Communications, is her company. And then project management, Brian Messing is a name that you all know. We may have a change and are likely to have a change with our grants administrator. We have on contract Linda Giltz currently. She's going to step back from that, so she's introducing us to someone else who is able and willing to step in. So Adrian and I will be meeting with him on Friday of this week, and Linda, talk about that. And then received word last week, or over the last week and a half, there's some staffing changes at Riverlink that impact us also. The executive director, Garrett Arts, has resigned. And so he'll be working through the end of June to help ensure a smooth transition to his successor. And then also Rose Keys, who was doing primarily our communications, has also accepted another position. So she is leaving or changing her role at Riverlink. And so we'll be looking for a replacement there. So hopefully that won't be too many bobbles in the road. To help us though, during this time, we do have the communications and marketing subcommittee of the advisory committee. So that has been a real boon for us. Silverline Park, we had a construction meeting today. The playground construction is well underway. They're setting rocks and stumps and logs and
Great.
things in place there. So that's moving along really nicely. Vertical construction is still scheduled to begin with crews on site next week on the 24th. There was a major hurdle that was cleared on the permitting side. We received our CLOMR. Received that word back from Department of Public Safety, state level, and then FEMA has a final approval on that. That's generally a little more perfunctory. So hopefully that will go smoothly and be in hand in a couple of weeks, which then permits the riverbank work to begin at the park. So that's phase 2 of that park. Phase 1 still on track to open by Labor Day. Riverside Park and Whitewater Way was conducted with Equinox, Riverlink, a public forum. On April 22nd, we had 30 to 40 people that participated in that. We had some questions and answers. And then we were pushing for people to go and give their feedback via a survey that is on the Riverlink website now. So that public input will be accepted through June. That will help inform that final design for Riverside Park. That was the intent of that public forum. Soil testing is underway now. So we actually have some folks on site now doing geotechnical at Riverside Park, both on this side of the riverbank and also on the other side. That's going on now. You will recall that we applied for a Cardiff grant. So Ms. Giltz was with us last month. So the application was submitted before the end of April. We are requesting $400,000 consideration for that grant. The water resources grant was applied for at the end of December. It's a $200,000 ask. And that award cycle, we're expecting an announcement this month. We'll see where that goes.
Eric, that first grant, we tried for that last year and didn't get it. So
This
Linda,
is not the first time, and so that's exactly right.
right,
So-
so she has really worked on this and has she?
Oh, boy.
Okay, so maybe we'll get that grant.
Yes, yeah, so we will score some extra points this year for some of the public input. that we've
Right,
been,
right.
We're going for the last. 6
That would be
months or so.
helpful. Really, that would be good.
Greenways, so some significant movement here. So the design contract has been awarded now and it's fully executed. And that design work, the project lead kicked off that meeting with staff. So Adrian and I were part of that yesterday, along with Buncombe County yesterday. And that was just looking at the schedule and some of the elements there and some of the responsibilities the town has versus what the county has. For that. So that's moving along. That's really good news. And we've been waiting on that for a long time, as you know. And so we're looking for construction to be underway next year if things go well. Budget is largely unchanged here. We are anticipating some change orders for Silverline Park. Haven't gotten those nailed down just yet, but you'll notice on this budget, we still have a healthy $177,000 of contingency built into that project to cover those. That is it.
Hey. Do we need to have a
Yeah.
closed session for
Yes, sir.
anything?
Okay, because we do not have to have a closed session tonight. Alderman Agnew,
Make a motion with adjourn.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Yeah, that's just good.